we had a quite serious disagreement about the recording of Comfortably Numb.
Pink Floyd was a true force of nature in the rock and roll world. This legendary band sold out arenas in the late 60s and 70s, and they looked to be on the path to immortality until they suddenly split. What might have caused this? While fans all over the world have speculated for so many years about the true reason behind the split, we finally know the truth. Roger Waters, the former leader of the band, who is now 80 years old, has revealed all the details about the split. What did he have to say? Join us as we discuss what this legendary Rock and Roll Hall of Famer had to say as he reveals how Pink Floyd came to an end. The truth will shock you. Formation and rise of Pink Floyd. Roger Waters went to London in 1962 to go to the Regent Street Polytechnic School of Architecture. For someone who would later become a rock star, this was an odd choice. However, a set of tests showed that he was good at architecture. He first thought about becoming a mechanical engineer, but his path led him to become an architect instead. It was at the Regent Street Polytechnic that Waters met Nick Mason and Richard Wright. The three of them became good friends and started hanging out together. By September 1963, Roger Waters and Nick Mason were sick of going to school, so they rented a flat in Stanhope Gardens from a part-time teacher at their institution. Their lives changed at this point, and they started to care more about music than schoolwork. They began making music with their friends: Richard Wright, Keith Noble, vocals, and Clive Metcalf, bass. The story goes on. They tried out different band names such as Sigma 6 and the Megadeths, but Sigma 6 was the one they stuck with the most. Noble's sister, Sheila, would sing with them sometimes. In the beginning, they mostly played at private events and practiced in a cozy room in their school's basement. When Metcalf and Noble left to start their band, things changed. The guys who were already in the band wanted to keep playing, so they asked two new guys to join. With Bob Close, a skilled guitarist named Sid Barrett, and Waters moving to bass, the band was ready for a new start. They changed their name to the Abdabs, or sometimes the Screaming Abdabs, by January 1964. Leonard's Lodgers, Spectrum 5, and the T-Set were some of the other names they tried before they finally chose Pink Floyd in early 1966. It was a name that came from two blues musicians, Pink Anderson and Floyd Council. It quickly became associated with groundbreaking music and legendary shows. By the beginning of 1966, Pink Floyd had found its core character, and Sid Barrett was in charge. He played the guitar and wrote most of the songs for the band. Their first record, The Piper at the Gates of Dawn, which came out in 1967, showed off his skills. He either wrote or helped write almost every song on the record. One song that wasn't on the list was Take Up Thy Stethoscope and Walk by Roger Waters. Things began to fall apart, though, by the end of 1967. Barrett's mental health was getting worse, and he started acting in more and more strange ways. This made it hard for him to keep being the artistic leader of the band. Early in 1968, the band and their managers got together to talk about what would happen next. Barrett could no longer make a difference the way he used to, and everyone agreed that it was a hard choice. As part of the deal, he quit the band. Despite this sad event, Pink Floyd profited from it. Pink Floyd's new manager, Steve O'Rourke, took over overseeing the band. Sid Barrett's departure from the band resulted in the official hiring of David Gilmour to fill the void. Roger Waters replaced Sid Barrett as Pink Floyd's artistic leader in 1968. Waters was the one who could see how to steer the band's music towards his interests, which were more political and philosophical than Barrett's whimsical style. Waters and Ron Geeson worked together in 1970 to make Music from the Body, a documentary's soundtrack. It was a one-of-a-kind project that showed how ready Waters was to try new things and work in different genres. Over time, Waters had a bigger impact on Pink Floyd's music. He became the band's main singer and lyricist, often singing lead vocals with David Gilmour and sometimes Richard Wright. In the late 1970s, and up until he left the band in 1985, he was the artistic force behind their work. Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon came out in 1973, with Roger Waters in charge. It became a big deal when Waters wrote all the lyrics for this record. It sold over 40 million copies worldwide and stayed on the Billboard charts for 736 weeks straight. It was still selling a lot of copies every week in 2005. The album is one of the best-selling in the US and the second best-selling worldwide. Waters was proud of how powerful the record was. He remembered playing it for his wife and seeing her cry. That's when he knew he had made something truly special that touched people deeply. During this time, Waters' thoughts and feelings greatly impacted Pink Floyd's music. The Dark Side of the Moon, Wish You Were Here, Animals, The Wall, and The Final Cut were all concept albums, which means they told stories or looked into certain topics. Waters' songs often talked about the price of war and how his father died in World War II. Many songs on their older album, A Saucer Full of Secrets, had this theme. It also appeared on the album When the Tigers Broke Free, at the Fletcher Memorial Home, and on the album The Final Cut, which was a tribute to his father. Waters' childhood in England after World War II greatly impacted The Wall, another famous Pink Floyd record that came out in 1979. There are themes of loneliness, loss, abandonment, the emotional walls we put up around ourselves, and the pressures of fame in the record. Millions of people liked it, which is why it's one of the best-selling records ever. It has sold over 23 million copies in the US. Pink Floyd hired Bob Ezrin as a co-producer for this big project, and the talented painter Gerald Scarfe to make the album's famous cover art. They also went on a huge tour called The Wall Tour, which included elaborate stage shows where a huge wall was built and then pulled down. But this success didn't last forever. Waters' departure from Pink Floyd and reunion. The last show of this tour, which took place at Earl's Court in London in 1981, was the last time Pink Floyd played with Roger Waters until the Live 8 event in 2005, when they briefly got back together. Pink Floyd's last record with Waters, called The Final Cut, came out in 1983. This album was mostly Waters' solo work, as he wrote all the music and lyrics. The album's lyrics were dark and political. He was critical of the British government and even called out the Prime Minister, Margaret Thatcher. It was hard to work on The Final Cut because Waters and the other band members, especially David Gilmour, didn't always agree on how to make music. Waters said no to Gilmour's request to put off recording so he could write some songs. It was because of this that Gilmour's name was taken off the credits, but he still got paid. The Final Cut was a critical hit, even though there were problems within the team. The magazine Rolling Stone gave it 5 stars and said it was the best work of art rock had ever made. Tensions within Pink Floyd had been building for years, and when Roger Waters quit the band in 1985, they finally burst. The artistic differences between the members were now unbridgeable, and Waters thought that the band had lost its spark. Using a clause in his contract, he publicly told the record companies EMI and CBS that he was leaving in December of that year. The breakup wasn't friendly. Waters sued to end the Pink Floyd partnership in 1986, saying that the band was no longer a creative unit that could work on its own. Funnily enough, he called them a spent force. But David Gilmour and Nick Mason, the other two members, weren't ready to give up the Pink Floyd name. They wanted to keep making songs under the same banner. This led to a nasty court case over who owned the band's name and music. Waters thought that Pink Floyd without him was an insult to their history. It didn't feel right, he said, like Paul McCartney and Ringo Starr trying to play as the Beatles without John Lennon. He was afraid that Gilmour and Mason would hire new people to write the music, which he thought would not be as good as what they had already done. The legal battle went on for a long time until 1987, when Waters and the other members of Pink Floyd finally came to a deal. After his managing contract ended, Waters kept the rights to some Pink Floyd creations, such as the idea for the wall and the inflatable pig from Animals. In 1999, Gilmour said that Waters had turned down an offer to play Dark Side of the Moon with the band at a show in London. In 2005, Roger Waters wrote about why he was leaving Pink Floyd. He agreed that it had been a bad negative time and that he had contributed to that pessimism. He said he felt bad that he had tried to put his opinions on the band's work and worth onto the other members, knowing that they didn't always agree with him. At that moment, he became aware of himself and saw how his actions had made things worse. It was a surprise when something that didn't seem possible happened. Roger Waters, David Gilmour, Nick Mason, and Richard Wright got back together as Pink Floyd for one show at the Live 8 event in London's Hyde Park in July 2005. Since their last show as The Wall in 1981, it had been 24 years since they had played together. The band played some of their most famous songs, such as Money, Wish You Were Here, and Comfortably Numb, during a powerful 23-minute set. The fans were thrilled to see the famous band back together, and it made both the band and the fans cry. Waters did say that the chances of a full reunion were low, even though the experience was good. He and Gilmour still had different ideas about where the band should go and what songs they should play. Even though Waters had planned to play a different set of songs, he decided to play the same ones for one night only. Even though there were still disagreements, the live show was a strong testament to Pink Floyd's lasting legacy and the power of their music on generations of fans. The band had been through a lot of trouble, but for a short time they were all on the same page. In November 2005, Pink Floyd was admitted into the UK Music Hall of Fame. They'd been inducted into the US Rock and Roll Hall of Fame on January 17, 1996. It's a fair honor for what they've done for music history. Speaking of what they've done for music, Roger Waters seemed to have benefited the most from the split, as you'll see in the final chapter. Roger Waters' post-Pink Floyd career. After Roger Waters left Pink Floyd, he started a new musical journey. He released his first record as a solo artist called The Pros and Cons of Hitchhiking. This wasn't your average rock record. It was a very personal look at how Waters felt about love, commitment, and the allure of living a carefree life. Reg is the main character in the story. He struggles with his desires for a stable family life and the freedom of the open road. Reg's dreams and fantasies come to life through the music, which is full of vivid images and deep words. Waters got some big names to help him bring this one-of-a-kind idea to life. Eric Clapton, the legendary guitarist, gave the record his signature bluesy sound. David Sanborn, a jazz saxophonist, added a touch of soulful improvisation. The talented Gerald Scarfe, who also worked on Pink Floyd's The Wall, designed the cover art for the record. This added another level of visual storytelling to the project. But not everyone liked the pros and cons of Hitchhiking. Some reviewers, like Kurt Loder, thought it was a weird and uninteresting album. In Rolling Stone, they gave it a harsh 1-star rating. Others, like Mike Deegan of AllMusic, thought it was a brilliant and symbolic piece of work that made great use of dreamlike images and streams of consciousness. Even though his first solo album got mixed reviews, Waters didn't let that stop him. He went on tour with Eric Clapton and a new band in 1984 to promote the pros and cons of hitchhiking. There was both new and old Pink Floyd music at the shows, so that fans could get a feel for both. The tour began in Stockholm on June 16th, but things didn't go as planned. Not many people bought tickets, so some bigger sites had to cancel the events. In the end, Waters said that the tour cost him a lot of money, but he didn't give up. In 1985, he brought the show to North America and played smaller venues there under the name The Pros and Cons. He also played some old Pink Floyd songs. It was a way for him to meet with his devoted fans and show off his music in a more personal setting. Even though there were problems at first, the album finally went gold, which shows how popular it was becoming. Waters kept exploring his artistic skills outside of music. He provided songs and a score to the 1986 animated movie When the Wind Blows, which was a sad story about a couple dealing with the aftermath of a nuclear attack. The name of his project band was the Bleeding Heart Band, and singer Paul Carrack was in it. Waters' second record by himself, Radio KAOS, came out in 1987. Billy was a deaf man from a poor Welsh mining town who could hear radio waves in his head. This album concept told his story. Billy's story is one of empowerment and defiance as he learns to talk to a radio DJ and then take over all the computers in the world. He fakes a nuclear attack to try to make things better, because he doesn't like how things are going in the world. After the record came out, Waters went on another tour in 1987, this time bringing the story of Radio KAOS to life on stage. Even though his last tour was hard, Waters kept pushing the limits of his creativity and looking for new ways to use music to share his ideas. The concert was a show like no other. It took place on a huge area of land between Postomer Platz and the Brandenburg Gate. Some figures say that twice as many people showed up in person as the official number of attendees, which was over 200,000. Another amazing fact is that a massive 1 billion people watched the live show on TV. A British billionaire named Leonard Cheshire asked Waters to put on this huge show to raise money for charity, not just for fun. Joni Mitchell, Van Morrison, Cyndi Lauper, Bryan Adams, the Scorpions, and Sinead O'Connor were just a few of the famous artists. Waters got to join him. He even got the help of a Soviet marching band, an East German symphony orchestra and choir, and U.S. military planes. Both the performers and the stage setup were great. Mark Fisher created a set that had a huge wall that was 82 feet high and 550 feet long. Huge inflatable puppets that looked like Gerald Scarfe's original art for the wall record loomed over the stage. A feast for the eyes kept the crowd captivated, and many famous rock stars were invited to the show. The partners of Waters from the past, Gilmour, Mason, and Wright, were noticeably missing. The show was a huge success, even though Pink Floyd's full lineup wasn't there. Waters later put out a double record of the show, which became a platinum seller in the US. Roger Waters was ready for a new start in 1990. He changed record companies and hired Mark Fenwick as his new manager. He also signed a global deal with Columbia. This made his third record by himself, Amused to Death, Possible, which came out in 1992. As a result of the Tiananmen Square protests and the Gulf War, this album wasn't just a collection of songs, it was a powerful and thought-provoking theme album. Waters used the album to criticize the idea of war becoming entertainment, especially on TV. Amusing Ourselves to Death by Neil Postman is the book that the title refers to. That book is about how media can keep us from paying attention to important things. Waters put together a talented group of people to help him with this big project. Patrick Leonard, who worked on Pink Floyd's A Momentary Lapse of Reason, co-produced the record. Jeff Beck, the famous guitarist, played on many of the songs, and a lot of other players also did great work. Having the album made in 10 different studios shows how hard the musicians worked on it. A lot of people liked Amused to Death, and some even said it reminded them of Waters' work with Pink Floyd. Aside from The Dark Side of the Moon and The Wall, Waters himself thought it was one of his best. In the US, the song What God Wants. But one got to number 5 on Billboard's Main Street Rock Tracks chart, and number 35 in the UK. Many critics gave Amused to Death good reviews, but it didn't sell as well as some of Waters' earlier records. He sold about 1 million copies, but he didn't go on tour to promote it. Fans would have to wait 7 years until Waters' In the Flesh tour in 1999 to hear some of its songs live. But Amused to Death made Waters more well-known as a solo act, even without a tour. He made a big, risky album that showed off his unique vision and unwavering dedication to social commentary. That year, 1999, Roger Waters thought it was time to go on tour again after a long break. His In the Flesh tour was a big deal. It included both solo work and old Pink Floyd songs. The show did really well, especially in the US. It was so hard to get tickets that many of the shows had to be moved to bigger spaces, even though he had booked smaller ones. The In the Flesh tour went around the world for 3 years and ended with a big show at the Glastonbury Festival in 2002. Over 70,000 people came to see Waters play. He sang 15 Pink Floyd songs and 5 of his own. Though Waters' triumphant return to the stage was great, he wasn't just thinking about traveling. Waters played a big part in making The Wall into a Broadway musical, which Miramax revealed in 2004. Songs from Dark Side of the Moon, Wish You Were Here, and other Pink Floyd records, as well as some new songs, were going to be in the musical. Parts of the opera were played in Malta in May 2004 as part of the Welcome Europe celebrations. The Broadway production was still being worked on at the time. A flashy light and fireworks show went along with the music, giving the crowd a taste of what was to come. In June 2006, Roger Waters started his 2-year Dark Side of the Moon Live World Tour to remember it. There was a lot to enjoy at the performances. The first half was a mix of Pink Floyd classics and Waters' solo work. The second half was a full performance of The Dark Side of the Moon. This was the first time in more than 30 years that Waters had played the whole record live. Nick Mason, who was Pink Floyd's drummer, joined Waters at some of the shows to add a nostalgic touch. He played with Waters during the Dark Side of the Moon set and the encore. Fans who missed seeing them play together finally got to see them together. To this day, Roger Waters remains an inspiration to many in the music business. What do you think about this legendary band? Was Roger Waters right to have quit? Kindly share your answers, thoughts, and opinions in the comment section. If you enjoyed the video, make sure you like, share, and subscribe to this channel to enjoy more videos like this. Also, click the next video shown on your screen. You will enjoy it.